Hey folks, it's Steve Wilmes and Matt Kita, and we're here on the Risk Control Show. Got kind of a serious topic today. It's the Loco Parentis and where your kind of authority ends as a staff member or a teacher of a school district. There's a lot of talk about this when it comes to gender identity. Who can transition a student. This is where it's come up recently, in this gender kind of debate, and who's got the authority over the kids, what should be taught, what should not be taught, where do the parents fit into this. And, we have a training video for school boards, and I think we were asked to do this maybe 2 years ago because of some with the COVID and how school board members were pushing certain issues that were way outside of their scope as a school board member. And so when we went through that training, we listed out, at least in the state of California, we have this listed as to what are the duties and responsibilities and authorities of a school board member. And it comes down to really enacting what the local community wants you to enact. And so that rolled into teachers and educators kind of going beyond their authority in regard to students and their level of parental guidance, right? And I think as long as I've been in the school risk management business, this has been a topic, Matt.
Right. I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think it's easier to understand when you remove the gender issue from it and you look at it simply as keeping a child physically safe from threats, right?
Right.
And so, we see this in many instances where, maybe a student runs away from home, and do they come to live with the teacher? Where does that fit into this whole scenario? We see this, Matt, what would you do if you're the security guard and school lets out and the kids walk home and they go to the local 7-Eleven there, across maybe 2 blocks down across the street, and they start to get into a fight? You as the security officer you're not sworn, you're just a security officer.
Right.
Where does your authority end? Does it end at the edge of school campus, or does it allow you to get in the golf cart and drive over to the 7-Eleven and break up fights?
Well, clearly leaving the campus is beyond the scope of my specific duties. Now, there's a part of it where you're not thinking anymore as a security guard, right? You're thinking of it as a human being, as a guy who feels protective over the students at the school, and you may feel like a responsibility to go over there and try and do something. But honestly, within the scope of your job, it ends at the campus line.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a big one there. And this, where it comes in, is this coming and going to and from school. Right. So when we look at that, we get confused. And I'm going to try and pull up the actual text here while we're talking, Matt. But the bottom line there is that the coming and going to school really revolves around like a field trip, or the bus operator picking up the child and taking them to and from school. So if you are the bus operator, it gives you the local parentis gives the authority to the education system to provide or act in the manner of the guardian coming to school, during school, and going home. Right? So as soon as that child steps off the bus to go home, then, and as soon as they make it to their front door, loco parentis ends.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so obviously there's a couple gray areas there, like if they get off the bus, they make it to the front door, and there's someone there attacking them. Okay, you're still kind of in that loco parentis to physically keep them safe.
Right.
But if once they hit that door and then they turn around and they go down the street, why do we always use Johnny? But little Johnny's house.
Poor Johnny.
And Johnny gets into a fight. You as the bus driver don't then pull back over and start to break it up. Your legal authority under loco parentis ends once that child is delivered home. And same thing happens if you go on a field trip. And actually, there's some spin on the field trip too. It's oddly written. I'll have you talk for a little bit about this as well. But the whole idea is that on the field trip, you're taking care of the student. On the way home, you're taking care of the student. If you get back to school after hours and you're there with the students when you're waiting for them to be picked up by their parents, then the guardianship role comes into play.
Right.
But that doesn't give you the authority to then make health decisions, elective health decisions on behalf of the child.
Right.
You're not in an emergency situation. You're not in a life-threatening situation. You're not in a critical care situation. You need to have that level issued to you by the parent. And we have the DNRs, the do not resuscitate orders, right? Like a lot of times we get confused on those as well. We think that there's a DNR, so I, as the staff, am not going to provide CPR or first aid or an AED because there's a DNR on record. Well, that DNR does not apply to you. It applies to the doctor, like the paramedic. Even has to kind of follow through on some of the basic care until the doctor instructs them not to. So you don't have the authority to enforce a DNR. You simply hand the DNR over to the paramedic who hands it to the doctor, right?
Yep.
So this loco parentis, I want to see if I can find this real quick, Matt.
Yeah, sure
While
thing.
we're talking about it. I know I've written about it many, many times on our blog, but go ahead.
I think that you mentioned the different aspects that are under consideration here. So it's not just the scope of the locale, being on or off campus, or where you have extended control, such as on a bus operation or on a field trip, where if you're taking the kids out, they're still under your control. Again, yes, it's also the scope of the actions that you can take. Yes, there's a certain scope where you're responsible for, let's say, their education or the food that they eat on campus, but you're not responsible for, again, medical decisions.
Right.
You can't extend that. You can't extend that to a broader, like that guardian phase that you are gaining within the educational system has severe limitations. The primary purpose of that is you are caring for these kids, I can't speak anymore, these kids in your care in that moment, but it's just that immediate care. Their overall, those life types of decisions, those are left with the parents, or with the guardians if they're not, if they don't live with their parents. So it's one of those situations where I think that humanity part of it is what really gets in the way. You mentioned the security guard again with the fight down at 7-Eleven, or the fight that happens after a kid gets dropped off at the Johnny gets in the fight after he gets dropped off from the bus. There's our responsibility as a employee of the district, of the school, as a member of the community, and then there is the human reaction to want to help.
Yeah, well, of course, and again, like that's where you're getting into Good Samaritan issues. But so many times, and I used to get these claims from parents, about some educator or educational staff member getting involved in a situation where they
Right.
have no authority to do so. And so I'm going to put this on here. I tried to put it in our little message so that it could come up for everyone to see, but I guess it's too long for the little program to handle. But here, 44807, every teacher, I'm going to read this out loud, Matt, since you can't see it yourself. But
Okay.
every teacher in the public school shall hold pupils to a strict account for their conduct on the way to and from school, on the playgrounds, or during recess. A teacher, vice principal, principal, or any other certificated employee of a school district shall not be subject to criminal prosecution or criminal penalties for the exercise, during the performance of his duties, of the same degree of physical control over a pupil that a parent would be legally privileged to exercise, but which in no event shall exceed the amount of physical control reasonably necessary to maintain order, protect property, or protect the health and safety of pupils, or to maintain proper and appropriate controls conducive to learning. And then we go into the specifics of even the students leaving campus for lunch. So this is
Right.
44808.5. The governing board of a school district may permit pupils enrolled at any high school to leave the school grounds during the lunch period of such pupils. Neither the school district nor any officer or employee thereof shall be liable for the conduct or safety of any pupil during such time as the pupil has left the school grounds pursuant to this section. In the event that ever governing board grants such permission, it shall send the following notice along with notification to parents and guardians. But basically, it's saying here that look, we don't have that responsibility under
Right.
the law. We don't have the authority to do certain things. And so that coming and going is very important to the school district. And like you say, it's a real push and pull between wanting to help out as a member of society, as someone that knows somebody and wants to exercise that control. And I get it. You develop relationships with the students, and you feel on some level that a student that's been with you for 4 years or 5 or whatever it maybe even longer, that they have become part of your family and to some degree. I mean, I know that my daughter is in wrestling. She's been with that coach for 5 or 6 years, 5 years, and they have a very strong bond. And there's been a lot of great lessons that he's taught her over the years, and I could see where he would want to protect her in the event that he saw something on the street, or she was sick or whatever. But that doesn't relieve his duty to contact the parents and get the parents involved. If there's a real emergency situation, sure, I'd be happy that he helped my daughter. Don't get me wrong, but there's some times where we get confused, and staff does get confused on occasion, and they think that they are helping, and they find themselves in hot water. I've had many cases where a child runs away from school and they want to live with the cool teacher, and the cool teacher is like, okay, yeah, your parents are abusing you, doesn't follow through on the mandated reporter training, provides a space for this child to live, and then later, once the parents find out, because the kid ran away, but they're actually staying with the teacher, then they accuse the teacher of sexual molestation or some sexual abuse, which may or may not have happened. There's been cases where it did and cases where it did not. And now you're in hot water. And the court just looks at you like, what are you thinking? We have these rules in there to protect everybody involved. But yeah, I think we're seeing this big push now on a different level from the physical, right? From the physical, from the medical, and we're seeing it move into new areas. And we need to understand that, there's a lot of provisions in the law that talk about the authority. So, know where your authority ends, and that now you're stepping outside your course and scope of employment, and everything that happens at that point is on your personal risk side of the house.
Right.
and
right.
And we see this all the time. Like, I had one, Matt, if you can believe this, the kids left, and it goes back to this security officer lunchtime period. They leave at lunchtime, and they're across the street. One of the kids hurts his legs, hurts a leg, and one of the other kids runs back to the security guard. He's like, oh, Johnny hurt his leg over here at the 7-Eleven. I don't know why I keep saying 7. I'm just throwing that out there. So don't put that in writing that it's happened at 7-Eleven. Now, at the local convenience store, and the security officer decides he's going to be a fine young chap, goes and gets the golf cart, which isn't registered to be driven on streets, right? It shouldn't be operated on public streets and highways. And so goes across to the local convenience store, picks up the kid, is coming back through the intersection, gets whacked. The kid ends up with really, like, everybody's damaged. They get whacked by a moving vehicle slamming through the intersection. And so you're like, what are you doing, right? And so then he's like, well, I had loco parentis. And the court's like, no, you didn't. And the school district's on this major claim issue. Instead of calling for an ambulance to come get the child, you took a golf cart on a public street. So, that being said, we have to be mindful of where these kind of stop and start. And it gets tricky. The field trip rules are tricky. The loco parentis is tricky, but just know, like, it doesn't give you the authority to go beyond. Again, remember what that said. Reasonable, the authority that a parent would have to maintain reasonable order. It doesn't give you the authority to go beyond that and push certain things, So.
Right, exactly. Like, I think that the word that stands out to me that I think expands in individuals' minds where their scope of control is well-being.
Right.
You take that, it's like so a lot of the other words like health and safety is very specific to the moment, but well-being you can kind of extend it to I'm helping them make decisions that will affect their lives, and everything like that, and it's that kind of thinking that I think leads people down the wrong road and crossing that line and not understanding where they need to be in relation to that line.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tricky,
It is.
I mean, I have stepped into situations for complete strangers in the, when I'm out and about, and
of course,
because there's an argument that is escalating, or I've responded to a lot of automobile accidents and these types of things. And you want to, as a good Samaritan, you just have to understand your role. And then that it comes down to your level of training and your ability to articulate those things. And a lot of times we can't, and so don't rely on a standard or a provision that you hear out there. And we could go into this whole disaster service worker too. And I love that one. I spent a lot of money on research on that, and just getting a better understanding. And there's a big misunderstanding on that in the public agency world. And I think, it's the same type of thing comes here. You hear, but you never read. Like, one of the biggest tips, pieces of advice I could give you is go out and actually read the standard, read the law, read the code, so that you know what's involved. And if you can't comprehend what it's trying to tell you, then that's the point where you need an opinion on it. And that's where our attorney comes in. A lot of times we've had attorneys look at this, and we've got the opinion. We put it into practice. We've seen the court cases and stuff like that. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that's it. Good one today, Matt. That's a real good one. It's
That
important.
is. It's a serious topic that I think very few people really spend much time thinking about it. So I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you got questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us, leave us a comment. Check us out on YouTube or wilmes.co, where all our blog posts are. That's where I was just showing you that little tidbit of information. There's a whole article around that. And then on top of that, don't forget to do a little online learning on Udemy, our dollar training club. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Risk Control Show.
See you guys.